Have you ever been betrayed before, where you shared a secret with somebody and they went and told the person that they weren't supposed to tell, and then you were at a place where you're like, I can't trust this person anymore? Like for me, and I've had a pretty easy, low drama life, I was trying to think, okay, when was the last time I was betrayed? And it doesn't happen for me. Maybe as often as it happens for you, I don't know. But like in junior high, when you tell your best friend, I like this girl, make sure you don't tell anybody, and definitely don't tell her. And then like by lunch, that's what everybody's talking about. And you're like, well, how did that happen? Well, the one person that you told was not supposed to tell, and they tell. And you're like, you either say it to them, or you definitely think it, I'm never going to tell them anything of importance again. And there are people in your life right now that you know, if I want nobody to find out about this, this person should not be, shouldn't know about it or shouldn't be made aware of it. Like there are surprise parties that you plan, that there are certain family members that you just make sure they're not aware of because you know they can't keep a secret. Now, how can a person like that earn your trust again? Well, over time, if they can take different pieces of information that they're given and keep it a secret and keep it under wraps, and eventually you can start to give them bigger, more important, or more information. But like right at the outset, how can I know that I can trust you ever again? Because once trust is broken, it is really hard to repair. Now, as we continue our series in the life of Joseph today, what we see is that Joseph kind of has to figure out that question for himself. As he's going to meet his brothers again, and as that whole part of his life is going to get brought back to the forefront, he's going to have to answer the question, how can I know that I can trust these guys? Because what we see Joseph do, it looks like he's kind of chipping at them a little bit. Whenever he gets reintroduced back into their life, it looks like Joseph takes shots at him. It looks like he's vengeful in his way that he interacts. But I think more than all of those things, it is a test. Joseph is trying to test to see where his brothers are, because if he ends up bringing them back to Egypt, he's got to know where they stand, and he's got to know how they're going to act. Because before, they sold him into slavery for like 2 years' worth of wages. Well, there's a lot more money at stake here, as he's like second in command of all of Egypt. What are they going to do? How are they going to treat him? How might they try to ruin his position or the plan to feed all these people or whatever it is? He's got to find that out. And so that's what we're going to kind of walk through today, is the test that Joseph gives his brothers and whether or not they pass or fail. Now, as a reminder, kind of the theme of our series is found in Genesis chapter 50. It's the very last chapter of the book of Genesis. It's when his brothers come to Joseph and they say, please be kind to us. Please don't hurt us. Before our dad died, he said that you need to be nice. And Joseph's response to all of that is, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done and the saving of many lives. And so this is true in the Joseph story, that you can see that God uses everything that happens to him, all the negative stuff that happens, ultimately for Joseph's good and for the good of, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people as this famine hits, kind of the ancient Near Eastern world. But this isn't just a statement that Joseph can make and we can look at it and go, oh man, I wish that was true of my life. I wish that the things that were intended to harm me might ultimately be used for good. Because Joseph isn't just like the exception to the rule, but Joseph's story kind of gives us hope. And this message of good coming through bad also happens in the New Testament. And the Apostle Paul says in Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So we know that not in some things, not in most things, but in all things, God works for our good and God works for his glory. So what we see happen in the Joseph story isn't just unique to Joseph. It's something that will happen in all of our lives. Whatever happens, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, God will use conversations and situations and circumstances ultimately for our good and for his glory. Now, as we kind of not only jump into but wrap up the Joseph story, the passage we're going to be covering, several chapters, we're going to be from 42 to 50. We're going to summarize a lot as we kind of bring this series to a close today. And I'm going to be kind of just recapping a bunch of stuff, and then when we get to Genesis 46 will be a section that we read from there. So if you want to open your Bible to that part, we'll be able to dive in and kind of walk through the passage together. So as the story begins, we're 2 years or so into the famine, and Joseph's brothers are back home with their dad, and they have no food. And at one point, Jacob's like, why are you guys just sitting here like staring at each other, hoping that food's just going to appear? Kind of the way your dad would talk to you when you were a kid. Like, why are you being so lazy? What are you holding that wall up for? Like, get out and do something. So he says, you guys need to go to Egypt. I heard there's food there. Go buy food for our family. So they load up their donkeys, and they go to Egypt. And when they show up, they notice there's a line, and there's a guy who seems to be in charge of everything. But unbeknownst to them, it's their brother Joseph. So when it's their turn in line, what do? They walk up and they bow down to Joseph, just as his dreams foretold. And they're there to buy food, and because the famine is severe, just like everybody else is there. Now, Joseph sees them, and of course, you know, he's dressed like an Egyptian. He's probably got his head shaved. He has no beard. And he speaks to them through an interpreter. He doesn't even speak in the common language. He recognizes them right away, and he gets one of his interpreters, and he starts yelling at them. And they're like, boy, these Egyptians are really high-strung. What's wrong with this guy? And it comes to find out that Joseph is accusing them of being spies, coming into the land and trying to figure out how they might steal food, or where the land is weak and where its defenses, you know, there's weak spots in. So you guys are coming here to try to take us over. How dare you, misuse our gracious, selling of this food to you as an opportunity to gain something on us. They're like, whoa. Like, we're here because the famine is severe. We're here like everybody else. We're just here to buy food. We're all brothers. We have the same father. And one of our brothers is no more, and our youngest brother is back home, but we are not spies. Like, far be it from us to try to do anything. We're just like one family unit. We're not going to try to take over Egypt. And so he says, nope, you're spies. I don't believe you. And he throws them in jail. Keeps them there for 3 days. And while they're there, and even they're arguing amongst themselves while he's speaking to them. And they're speaking in Hebrew, not realizing that he can understand everything they're saying. And they're like, it's because of what we did to Joseph that this is happening. And Reuben's like, I told you guys to leave him alone. What's wrong with you? And they're kind of bickering back, even though they're like grown men. Like, they're grandpas by this point of the story. And they're arguing with each other like, no, I said I was going to sit there. No, that's the front seat. I called dibs on shotgun, like your kids do when they're trying to get ready for school and everybody's late. That's what this scene looks like. Now, Joseph sees that there's very much this anger and competition and backbiting still, just heavy. There's a heavy dose of that within all of them. And as they talk about, hey, this is something that we've done, and Joseph has to go away out of their presence because he finds himself weeping. So he turns around and he tries to hide his face, and so he throws him in jail. They're there for 3 days, and eventually lets him out, all except for Simeon. He's like, this guy's going to stay, and if you guys come back to buy more food, you better bring your youngest brother. That will prove to me that you guys are all telling the truth. So they go back. Dad sees them all coming. He's like, hey, we're missing one of the brothers. Where's he at? And they told him the whole story. And he gets angry. And he's like, why did you tell them that you had another brother? They're like, we didn't know he's going to ask us to bring Benjamin with us. Like, he was interrogating us. We were just trying to tell the truth because we're not spies. We're not trying to infiltrate the land. And so he's like, no, Benjamin's not going, and that's final. And then they eventually eat all the food that was brought back from Egypt. And whenever they're going to, hey, we're out of food, what are we supposed to do? Jacob's like, well, you guys should probably go back to Egypt and buy more food. They're like, Dad, he told us not to come back without Benjamin. So if we show up without Benjamin, Simeon's not getting out of jail, and we're all going into jail, and then you're going to get no food. He's like, no, I can't send my son. I can't send him back. And eventually Judah steps up. And Judah says, listen, I will take complete and total responsibility to what happens. I know something happened to Joseph. And just imagine them saying that. Dad, we know something happened to Joseph. We sold him into slavery. We know something crazy happened to Joseph, but nothing's going to happen to Benjamin. We promise you, nothing's going to happen. Judah's like, Dad, I will be personally, whatever happens to him, whatever you want to do to me, it's all fair. But we have to take Benjamin back with us. Now, when they get sent back, they have to bring extra money. Because the first time that they left, the first night that they opened up their bags, the money that they brought to buy the food was all back in their bags because Joseph told the servants to put it all back. And so they are all kinds of freaked out right now, trying to figure out, what are we supposed to do? And this is God getting back at us, and this is not going to end well for anybody. But they all go back to Egypt. And what happens is Joseph has them brought into his personal home. And he's like, prepare food. We're going to eat together at noon. And Joseph keeps doing his thing and overseeing the entire country. And they're in the house. And they're like, what are we doing in this guy's house? This isn't good. And Simeon's brought back up out of jail. And they go to the steward of the house, kind of the servant in charge. And they bring him the money. And they say, hey, somehow, even though we paid, all of our money was back in our bag. So we're bringing that money. And we brought more money for us to buy grain with. And the servant's basically like, oh, you guys are good. Don't worry about it. Joseph shows up. He's talking to all of them, and he sees Benjamin. He says, oh, is this the brother that you told me about, your youngest brother? So he's talking to Benjamin. He's asking, so is your dad still alive? Is he still good? Oh, yeah, dad's really good. This is our youngest brother. We're here to buy more grain. We're not spies. We promise. And when Joseph sees his younger brother Benjamin, he runs out of the room and into his own private room, and he just sits there and he weeps. Now, and once again, like whenever I read a Bible story and I'm trying to process it, like we skip over things, and sometimes we forget what it would have been like. Like, what would Joseph's brothers, as they're standing there, and Joseph just takes off running out of the room, and they're like, are the soldiers coming in? Where did he go? Why isn't he coming back? What's going on? Did we do something to offend him? Reuben, what did you say? I didn't say anything. It was Levi. Levi, what? They go back and forth again. But they're trying to figure out what's going on. They have no idea that it's Joseph. And they all think they're going to go to prison for the rest of their lives. Probably. And so they're kind of like really gun shy. And if I'm the brother who's the fastest in the group, I'm like, I'm going to get out of here. They catch all my other brothers. And they'll be good with like catching half of us. But I can get out. Maybe I can get free. And where's the door? Like, that's the kind of stuff you're thinking. So Joseph, when he gains his composure, he washes his face off. He comes back in the room. He says, hey, everybody sit down. It's time to eat. So he sat the brothers down in their order of birth, which they thought was weird. He gave Benjamin 5 times as much food as he gave everybody else, because Benjamin's the only one that he really likes at this point, probably, right? The Egyptians sat at their own table and ate, and Joseph sat at his own table and ate because it was detestable for the Hebrews to eat with the Egyptians, which is an interesting little tidbit that Moses, who writes the book of Genesis, throws in for us. So they eat and they feast and they all relax. It says that basically they ate and they had their fill. So they're all relaxed. Their guard is down. The next morning, as the sun's about to rise, they pack up their stuff. They're going to go. Here's what Joseph does. This is his test. He grabs his cup. It was a fancy cup. Everybody has a cup that they like, by the way. I have a certain coffee cup that I really don't wash, that I drink out of every morning. You may think it's gross that I don't wash it. It just tastes better, okay? So you got your special cup, right? But my special cup is just a cheap, oversized coffee mug. Joseph's special cup probably would have been gold with jewels and all kinds of stuff on it, like a really expensive cup. So he takes his special cup and he gives it to his servant. And he says, all right, you see that guy? That guy's name's Benjamin. He's the youngest. Now, as they're packing up their stuff, you're going to help them load up. I want you to put my cup in his bag. Don't let anybody see you. The servant's like, all right, you're the boss. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So he goes, and he's helping them load up. And sure enough, got it in the bag, got everything loaded. All right, you guys have a safe journey. Say hi to your dad for me. Be safe. And they get sent out. And he lets them get just outside of town. He says, all right, go get them. You know what to do. So the servant goes out. He's probably got some soldiers with him. And he accuses them of stealing the cup. And they're like, no, we wouldn't steal. Remember, we had extra money in our bags, and so we brought that money, and we brought additional money. Like, why would we try to steal from you guys? We wouldn't do that. And so they're like, fine, we'll put all our stuff down. You can go through it, and whoever's stuff it is, you can kill them. You can make us all your slaves. He's like, all right, fine, I'll search the bags. So he starts searching the bags. Goes through, and then he gets to Benjamin. And what does he find? Aha! And they all go, and their faces go white. NIV says that they tore their clothes, which is a sign of like anger, and you're upset, and the mourning process has started. They load back up, and they go back. Joseph's just standing there. He's got all of his guys with him. Looks like a Egyptian mob boss, right? And he says, why would you guys steal from me? You stole my cup. And they're like, no. What can we do? What can we say? We're innocent. We promise you we're innocent. There's nothing we can do or say. And he's like, well, just listen. The guy, the Benjamin guy, he's the one who stole it. You guys can all go free. I'm just going to take him. And Judah steps up, and he explains the whole situation. That one of his brothers is dead, and that Benjamin is the last son from this particular mother, and that Jacob will die if Benjamin does not come back. And so Judah's like, you take me instead. I know we don't deserve that, but just please take me instead. Let Benjamin go free just for the sake of my aging father. This would kill him if Benjamin doesn't come back. Which, as a side note, Judah, that's the son of Jacob, or the son of Israel, that the Messiah ends up coming through. That's Jesus' bloodline. He comes from the tribe of Judah. And just as Judah steps in and says, spare him, take me, Jesus does the exact same thing. It's a foreshadowing of the Christ event, which I think stuff like that is interesting. But whenever Judah does this, Joseph shouts at the top of his lungs in the Egyptian language, everybody get out of here, out of my presence now. Well, the brothers have no idea what he's saying because they don't speak Egyptian. They've been communicating through a translator this whole time. So all the Egyptians are like, out, they're gone. And Joseph starts weeping and unable to speak early on, and he's crying and weeping so loudly that Pharaoh's household heard it. And he's trying to speak, and if you've ever been choked up, it's you can't talk. So he's just probably weeping and weeping and weeping and weeping. And eventually he's able to tell them, it's me, it's Joseph. Is Dad still alive? You said he's still alive and well. Is he really still alive and well? And they are unable to speak to him or answer any of his questions because of the plethora of emotions that are overcoming him as well as them. What do you mean he said he's Joseph? How does he even know that name Joseph? And they're trying to figure this all out. And eventually, Joseph says, come close to me. Gather up. When they had done so, he said, I'm your brother Joseph, the one you sold to Egypt. And now do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Now, when he says, don't be angry with yourselves, my first thought is, but are you angry at us? Because you're kind of a big deal here. Like, it's a big house, and you're like second in command in Egypt. So if you're angry, okay, fine, I won't be angry with me. That's going to be easy for me. Are you angry with me? But he goes on to say in verse 6, for 2 years now there's been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Notice how he is pointing everything back to God and what God has done and how God has protected and how God has provided. Joseph is recognizing at this point that God is not only orchestrated all of this, but has protected him through all of this and blessed him through all of this as well. He goes on to say, so then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay, and you will all live in the land of Goshen, near me. You, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and your herds, all that you have, I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all that belong to you will become destitute. So he sends them off, and he says, guys, don't fight along the way, because he knows how his brothers can be. Pharaoh hears that Joseph's brothers are in town, and he's overjoyed for Joseph. And he says, look, when you send them back with the best things of Egypt. and you tell them, don't have them worry about bringing their stuff back. They're going to have access to the finest, most expensive things that Egypt has to offer. So they don't need to bring any of their possessions. We're going to give them all new stuff when they get here. So they have this whole Egyptian caravan with them, with camels and carts full of all kinds of stuff. And they show up, and Jacob's outside. He can see them coming, and Joseph stays back home, but all the brothers come back, and it's like, look at all this stuff. Joseph's alive. How can he be alive? Well, maybe he didn't die like we thought. And well, how is his cloak covered in blood? Like those are the questions that probably would have been asked. Well, we found it. We maybe poured some blood on it. I don't know. It's like, maybe we, how people do. Like, what are you saying? But anyway, Daddy's alive. Look at all this cool stuff we got. Look at the stuff. Focus on the stuff. Stop trying to figure out how he's still alive. So Jacob's like, I don't believe it, but look at all this stuff. So he goes to Egypt. His entire family go with him. There's like 70 people that go to Egypt that are just his descendants, plus his son's wives and servants and things like that. So they all go to Egypt. And when he meets Joseph, and you can just picture this story and how this would all unfold. Like it just says that they embraced each other a long time and they wept. Because for Jacob, he's received his son back from the dead. He thought he was gone all these years. And here his son is standing before him. And, he's made it, so to speak. He is second in command in all of Egypt. Like, how could you even dream that something like that would happen? Not only is he not dead, but he's like the most successful entrepreneur in the entire world. Pretty cool thing. And for Joseph, he probably wondered deep down, am I ever going to see my family again? And here he is. He has the opportunity to see his family. And so Joseph actually selects 5 of his brothers, because Joseph's got a pretty good head on his shoulders, and he knows, if I send all my brothers up there, they're going to fight in front of Pharaoh. It's going to be bad. So he picks the 5 that are probably the most respectful and least likely to embarrass him. He brings them to Pharaoh, and he basically says, look, all you need to say is, we're shepherds, we're your servants. Thank you for allowing us to be here and to exist on planet Earth. Like, that's all you say. They said a little bit more, but the reason Joseph said that is shepherds were detestable to the Egyptians. Not only were the Jews detestable, but just shepherds by and large were, and these were Jewish shepherds, which is like 2 strikes against you. So Joseph's like, just go in and say as little as possible. And then he brings in his father. And Pharaoh is very respectful towards Jacob. How many years have you been alive? And what's your life been like? And they talk for a little bit, and then they settle in the land of Goshen, which is the most fertile land in all of Egypt. And whenever Jacob is nearing the end of his life, he brings Joseph in and says, you need to make me a promise that when I die, that you do not bury me among the Egyptians, that you take me home to a land that God is eventually going to give us as a people. And I want you to bury me with Abraham, bury me with Isaac, with my forefathers. Not here, but there. So that when you guys end up taking up the land, that I will, in a way, be with you. And it was Jacob's way of making a declaration of faith. Because where you choose to be buried, oftentimes to people is very important. And in that time period, it was extremely important. And so he's like, don't bury me in one of the tombs in Egypt. I don't care how big the pyramid is or whatever. I want you to bury me back home in the cave that my grandpa Abraham bought, because that's the land that we will inherit. I mean, it was him saying, I believe that God is going to do what God says he's going to do. And so eventually, Jacob dies. The Egyptians mourn for him for 40 days in honor and respect for Joseph. And they take him and they bury him in the tomb of his forefathers. And as Joseph gets near his death, he makes the Israelites give him the same promise. Only instead of take me when I die and bury me, it's when you are led into the promised land, you take me with you. Because I know you're going to go there eventually. You don't have to do it when I die. Do it when God gives you the land. And that was his declaration of faith. And for Joseph, I mean, just think about all that he experienced, all that he saw, the way that he experienced God moving in his life. For him, it's not, oh man, I hope this happens. It's when it happens, this is what I want you to do as a result. And it eventually does happen, like 430 years after the people are enslaved. But eventually, they make it to the promised land. They come out of Egypt and they're delivered. And all throughout their story, you see this message of God working in all things for the good of those who love him. You see that story playing out among the Jewish people. That after twist and turn in their story, it's not just Joseph's story, in their story as a people, you see God protecting them. You see God preserving them. You see God establishing them, making them a great nation. And eventually, the ultimate promise that he gave to the Jewish people, the bringing about of his Messiah, all of it happens in the midst of hurt and pain and chaos. And as we wrap up the Joseph series, the thing that sticks out to me is Joseph's ability to forgive his brothers and to surrender all of that over to God. When they show up, it does seem like he's overly harsh, but it's a test to see where their hearts were. And when Judah steps in and is willing to trade his life for Benjamin's, he knows all of this stuff that they had done in the past, the things that they had done to me, they're not going to be that way anymore. And he had to be careful because he was bringing them to Egypt. And their connection to him as second in command could eventually get him in trouble if they use his name improperly. If they go about harassing people, taking things that aren't theirs. Well, no, we're Joseph's brothers. We can do what we want. That could catch up to Joseph. Joseph's got to be careful. He's got to be mindful. And there's a phrase that sometimes we use, which is forgive and forget. Just forgive and forget. That's not biblical. Forgiveness is, but not the forgetting. I mean, if somebody hurts you, they hurt your family, they take advantage of you in some way, that doesn't just get cleared from your memory bank. Be mindful of it as you move forward in life. So that if it was a business partner or a friend or whatever, that you not give them the same opportunity to hurt you in the future. Yes, you need to forgive. But you need to remember for your protection and for the protection of the people that you love. But what we got to be mindful of is when you forgive, you do let go of the opportunity to bring about consequences on your own. You don't interact with that person with vengeful thoughts or desires. You do not seek revenge against them. If you have forgiven them, it is God's job to avenge you. It is not your job. Now listen, the revenge and being vengeful makes for a better TV show, makes for a better movie, but it will catch up to you in life. If you carry hatred and you harbor anger long term, it will only tear you up and eat you from the inside out. Joseph has forgiven. That's clear in his story. And he didn't forget because he wanted to make sure that Benjamin was protected and that his brothers were going to do the right thing whenever they get into a place of prominence in the land of Goshen. So don't seek revenge. Don't look for opportunities to tear someone down or break them. Allow God to do it all. Now, as I say that, one thing, in terms of over-application. So if someone hits you and you're in an accident and they total your car, but they refuse to pay, I guess we'll let God know. Get the insurance company involved. Make sure that things are made right. Well, if God wants this car fixed, he'll send me a check for that. No, that's silly. Don't be silly, okay? Silly's the nice way for me to say that, by the way. But people think that way a lot. Well, they committed a crime. They broke into my house and stole stuff. But you know what? Well, no, call the police. Have fingerprints taken. See if you can figure out who did it. If you have video cameras in your house, blast their picture on Facebook so anybody knows who it is. So that you can have justice. Justice is different than revenge, okay? Revenge is you seeking street justice, or you going outside of what society allows because you think you're owed something. Justice is a person paying for what they've done. That is biblical. So don't, okay, fine. There never are any consequences for our actions. No, if I do something illegal, I get thrown in jail. It's not woe is me. It's, well, that was dumb. I shouldn't do that kind of stuff anymore. And that's true of every single person. So don't over-apply. But most of the time, the things that happen to us are not things that you can turn in. Like when you're a kid, you do tell the teacher, I told so-and-so that I like this person, and then they told them, and they promised me they would. And you know what the teacher says? Next time, don't tell them stuff. This is life. You learned a valuable lesson today. Don't tell them things in the future. And that's not good enough for us, is it? And so whether you're in second grade or sixth grade or whatever, you try to find a way to get even. Most of the time, you make up. Oh, they told me that they like that person. It's somebody that nobody would like. And then in that way, you get even. And God's sitting there going, oh, you people. That's actually when headache medicine got invented. The angels invented it for God because of people like me, and maybe even people like you. And through it all, what we will say and what we think at the very least is that's not fair. God, that's not fair. Look what they did. That's not fair. I need justice. I need to get even because that's not fair. And I'm really glad that my life is not filled with fair. Because if it was filled with fair, I'd be in a really bad spot. Because grace is not really fair. It's not fair that Jesus had to come and die the way that he did, so that you and I might have forgiveness of sins. That's not fair. That's grace. And so in our lives, it's not about us making things fair. It's not about us making things easy or even. It's about us trying to live the way that God has called us to live. To let go of hate and anger and to forgive. No, it's not fair. God's not asking you to be fair. He's asking you to forgive the way that you and I have been forgiven. So Joseph, in his situation, he forgave. It wasn't really fair that he did, but he did. Because he let go of all that anger and hatred. Bad stuff happened to him, and he was able to forgive. Really bad stuff happened to Jesus. He was beaten, whipped, had the crown of thorns jammed on his head, had to carry his cross. He was crucified. You remember one of the 7 statements that he makes while he's on the cross? Among others, he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we might get to that place where we're able to forgive somebody who's hurt us days later, months later, years later, but never in the moment. When someone is in the action of hurting us and causing pain, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, whatever, our first thought isn't, God, forgive them. At least that's not my first thought. That was Jesus' thought. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so today, as we remember Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, we want to remember that attitude that he had, that love and grace that was present all throughout his life, particularly when we see it in the cross. And we want to remember that sacrifice.